Putin used to show off what Russia could do, to fly this freaking ice rink from Russia to Central America, to make a good impression for Russia's Olympic bid. It was a Russian air cargo company called, this is the name of it. I'm not going to pronounce this because Stephen Colbert will make fun of me if I try. I know the first word is Volga. The second word, no idea. Pronounce it at home however you like. But that is the company that Vladimir Putin picked to fly the ice rink to Guatemala. It's also a company that was at the center of one of the great modern corruption stories at the United Nations. This year's Russian UN mystery is, of course, about the Russian ambassador to the UN dropping dead with no warning at the age of 64 last month, followed by the U.S. State Department putting out a strange statement insisting that no cause of death would be released for him because, quote, Ambassador Churkin's diplomatic immunity survives his death. That's this year's Russia-UN intrigue. Before this, though, before the mysterious death of the ambassador this year, before this intrigue, the big Russia-UN intrigue before that was when a bunch of their senior diplomats got nailed in a huge bribery and corruption scheme. It was a bribery scheme involving that same company, that same air cargo company that flew the ice rink to Guatemala for Vladimir Putin. A bunch of Russian diplomats, including some of the most senior diplomats they had at the UN, were caught and arrested in conjunction with this bribery scandal. The company itself got in big trouble. They got struck off the list of approved airlines for any UN-related business because of their links to corruption and their links to corrupt Russian officials. Turns out, though, that Russian company, that air cargo company, don't worry, they're doing okay now. Because now we know that as recently as August 2015, that company was paying Trump National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. And then in October 2015, he was taking more Russian money from a Russian computer firm that U.S. intelligence agencies have long believed to be linked to Russian intelligence. If you want to see the documentation of those payments, it's here. These documents were first published. The story was first reported today by one of America's great investigative reporters, Michael Isikoff. He now works at Yahoo News. How Mike Isikoff got this documentation, though, how we got this stuff, is itself a great story. And it's about Flynn. I mean, if you step back from it for a second, the National Security Advisor getting fired 24 days into the new administration because he misrepresented his contacts with foreign governments, I mean, that alone, if that was the only worrying or negative thing that had happened in the entire Trump presidency thus far, that would be one of the biggest Washington scandals in decades. As it stands, it's one of many. But it has now been 1 month since Mike Flynn was fired, and almost everything about his firing and his tenure as National Security Advisor has question marks lingering around. I mean, why the administration hired him in the first place is still a big part of the mystery. When Mike Flynn got brought on board as a top advisor to the Trump campaign, even before they won the election and he became National Security Advisor, just being brought on board the campaign in a formal role, that itself raised a ton of eyebrows, in part because Mike Flynn's behavior toward Russia was already really odd for a recently retired general. And at the Republican National Convention last summer, Mike Isikoff, this great reporter, he asked Mike Flynn about that directly to his face. It was one of the great news moments that came out of the Republican convention. Watch.
Last December, you flew over to Moscow to participate in the 10th anniversary celebration of RT, Russian television, a propaganda arm of the Russian government, and you sat next to Vladimir Putin at a celebratory dinner. Were you paid for that event?
You'd have to ask the folks that went over there to
I'm asking you.
RT is actually a good channel.
Yeah, I mean, I went over there as a speaking event. It was a speaking event.
And
what difference does that make?
Well,
I mean, somebody go, oh, he's paid by the Russians.
Well, Donald Trump has made a lot of the fact that Hillary Clinton has taken money from Wall Street.
Yeah, I didn't take any money from Russia, if that's what you're asking me.
Well, then who paid you?
My Speakers Bureau. Ask them.
Okay.
My speakers, ask them. You know what? Don't say something like that idly. Don't say, ask them idly to an investigative reporter like Mike Isikoff. Also, just don't say it unless unless you mean it. Because we now know that a congressional committee did ask them. A congressional committee did follow up on Mike Flynn's suggestion, ask them, that they ask his Speaker's Bureau about that trip to Russia. From this letter released today by Democratic Congressman Elijah Cummings, we now know that the Oversight Committee in the House, they asked Mike Flynn's Speaker's Bureau last month, hey, who paid Flynn to go to Russia and meet with Vladimir Putin? And the Speaker's Bureau responded in full, providing all their documentation surrounding that trip, including the stubs of the checks and the email chain negotiating it, the terms of the deal. And it turns out, yeah, Russia paid him. Russia paid him. My favorite part of the back and forth with the Russians was this. Great news. He has accepted in the